Alright, welcome back. I'm going to try to make this one quick, and it's going to bounce around a little bit, but what I'm going to focus on is, at the start here, the differentiation between the word bull and the word ox in all this syncretic language. So this is the Taurus field, and to me, the way I interpret the language, whenever you hear the word bull, what the language is referring to is this counter space, the hyperboloid. And anytime they're talking about the ox, they're talking about the Taurus field itself. And the difference there is that the hyperboloid is where all the potential is, and the Taurus, the field itself, is the loss of potential. And so by definition, a bull is not castrated, and by definition, an ox is castrated. This field represents the ox. It represents the loss of potential. And it's also a steer. A steer is also castrated by definition. You'll see it's an anagram for Taurus, steer, Taurus. We'll see why ox is the word used there as we go. But so that's at least the initial sort of differentiation. If you go back to my older videos, the syncretic bull of Taurus in the field, you'll get a better idea of how I see that this field itself functions. And now this is an electrical wave, which is what this is. This is all three-dimensional, and so is this. I would argue that this is exactly this, and if it's not sound or light traveling and repropagating itself, this is the insular system of an atom. It's repropagating on its own center. It's a closed system. So within that, this is every atom. So this is an atom too. It's all fields. They're all fields. But it begins, anybody who studies astrology, this first sign, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, that's cardinal, fixed, mutable. Cardinal, fixed, mutable. And cardinal energy begins things. It's this fiery, inspirational, initiator type energy. Fixed, but the cardinal energy runs out of inspiration. It just wants to start new. It's there to start new things. Fixed energy isn't really into starting new things, but it's really there to sustain what's already been started. Very dependable, hardworking, stubborn workhorse is that fixed energy. Extra dependable. And the mutable signs are the signs that are adapt and change and go through transformation and their own death and then rebirth. Cardinal signs, all this new birth. And so there's like a birth, a life, and a death, and a rebirth, and a life, and a death. That's how electricity flows. It's not quite as simple as positive and negative. There's a lot more differentiation to that wave than what your average electrician might look at. And that's another way of differentiating those energies. And now, what you have here is, this is this here. This is the longitudinal wave. This is the transverse wave. This is the magnetic longitudinal. This is electric. So, and it's this magnetic pulse perturbation in this field is what creates this wave in the first place. And so we've got a pulse, we've got a bit of creation happening. And if there is no fixed energy to hold that wave open, it just collapses into the mutable. It's the fixed energy that holds the wave open at all. Otherwise, you would just have this kind of, just sort of this static along the longitudinal. It'd be cardinal, mutable, life and death, life and death. Without that fixed energy, you don't actually get a wave, and the wave is what creates time and space. It's a space in the ether. It's a wave in the ether, the universal ether. And so, getting into this language, we've got cardinal signs and we've got fixed, and fixed is Phi-Oxed, because there's a Phi ratio built into every Taurus field. And there is no field until you have the fixed energy. The fixed energy is what creates the field itself. And now it's a Taurus field because Taurus is the first fixed sign, and this is Aries, cardinal. This is the beginning. This is all. We're still in consciousness here. This is the point of consciousness, and this whole first sign is the sign of consciousness. This is where it hits the physical. Taurus. Taurus fixes this spark into a permanent standing wave. And so that's why the field itself is called a Taurus field, because without that Taurian, the Taurus is the fixed earth. It's the most solid, the most stubborn, the most dependable. It's that energy that holds, that gives the inertia to the original spark to keep going. The Taurus sign is inertia in motion. The bull is inertia at rest. And so, and then, that last sign, mutable, we've been talking about it. When you get into all this and realize that sound is sort of the original wave, and light is a product of sound, we're muting a bull. That's that death. You mute the bull. You silence the original wave, and then everything starts new in a cardinal sign. And that cardinal word can get broken down by in a whole another video. Now, another thing I want to get at, which is all related to this ox, it's this idea of the ox, how universal that is. Almost anywhere where the letter X is used in the language, you start thinking about the ox, and you'll start piecing things together. So, what we have here's our zodiac, and I have labeled here what are considered the cross-quarter days. This is, let's get a different color to contrast this. There's the cardinal cross down the middle. So here we've got spring equinox, summer solstice, fall equinox, winter solstice. This is 6 a.m., this is noon, this is 6 p.m., this is midnight. This is the universal fractal. This is all the universal fractal. Now, what I have marked here are the cross-quarter days. So this is a 90-degree angle. This is a square, but this is a semi-square. It's a 45-degree angle. And in astrology, those are angles of friction. I'll get into that in a second. But what we have, there's the holidays here. These are important days within the spiritual year. Spiritual, spiral ritual. This is all spiritual. This is all a spiral ritual. But we celebrate these days because they're really important days within the energetic cycle of the year. And this, May Day, this is Lammas Day, this is Halloween, and this is Groundhog Day. A little side syncretism, Groundhog Day is the day where we find out if we see the shadow or not, right? But this is it's a metaphor for a spiritual shadow. People talk about seeing their shadow, their own negative sort of characteristics maybe played out in other people in front of them, and they see it and they recognize their self in it. That's the whole idea of this. On February 2nd, we're halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, and this is the beginning of the year, so this is the final stressful semi-square in all of this circuit of the year. And if we've been doing our spiritual work, we won't see our shadow. If you don't see your shadow, you've been doing your work, and you're basically on your way to springtime and renewal. If you did see your shadow, you've got some more work to do this winter before you're ready to enter spring. That's the symbolism there. But what we have is, these are the fixed signs. And so if we, what that does is create this X. And what that is, it's, going back to there is no wave until you've got the fixed signs. This is the ox, the O, X, the O, and the X, with the fixed signs. There is no field until it's Phi-Oxed. Everything's oxed, fielded in a Phi ratio, hence Phi-Oxed. And then this is also where we get the words, oct. Here's October 31st. It's the 10th month, but back in the day it was actually the 8th month. Just like September was the 7th, and November was the 9th, and December, Deca, is 10th. So if you start with the cardinal cross, you've divided it into 4, and if you divide it again with the fixed, you've divided it into 8. You've oct. You've oxed. And you've oxed. You've created a field. There was no field until you oct it, until you divided it into 8 and added the fixed energy. And that's also what creates the number 8 of eternity, oct. There is no time and space without that fixed energy, the ox. Oh, and the last thing I want to mention is the word field itself. Phi, electricity, and the D is either dimension or dielectricity, but it's the field of dielectricity. This is dielectricity separating itself, and it's doing it at a Phi ratio, creating electrification. All this stuff is syncretic. The further you go, the further it syncretizes. Thanks, everybody. Bye.